Welcome. I'd like to describe the protocol we'll use to interact with our webinar guests today. Then I'll introduce them. You've set all your microphones to mute as you came into the presentation, and click the icon to raise your hand. When we unmute you, please keep the background noise at a minimum. If you don't have a mic or you don't want to talk, then use the question panel to type your questions, and we'll pose them for you. My name is Steve Villachica. I'm an associate professor of instructional and performance technology here at Boise State University. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our guests today. We've invited Dr. Joe Lamos, Dr. Pat Parish, and Bruce Muller of COMET, the Cooperative Program for Operational Meteorology, Education and Training, to join us. I can't say that, obviously. COMET is part of UCAR, the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research. We've invited Joe, Pat, and Bruce to spend time with us today because of their work creating immersive learning experiences for people who forecast the weather. We've also invited them because of the sheer scale of the work they do as part of a very large-scale education and training initiative. During their hour with us, our guests will address the following topics. They'll introduce themselves and describe how they came to the work they do. They'll demonstrate their work in e-learning. They'll talk about the behind-the-scene creation of these efforts, and they'll answer your questions. Owing to the interest in these topics, we've opened this webinar up to the larger IPT nation comprised of our students, alumni, and faculty. Joe, Pat, and Bruce, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm happy to be here, as is Bruce and Pat. What we're going to do is start off with an overview of the COMET program. So at a distance, so you know what we look like. Here are our photos, and as Steve said, I'm the Deputy Director of the COMET program. I've been with the program for 20 years come this October, and Pat Parish, how many years, Pat, have you been?
Going on 19.
19. And Bruce is our youngster here. How many now? 8?
8 years.
8 years. So we've been fortunate that our staffing has been, for the most part, very stable. And so that allows us to build up expertise and do a lot of nice things. I'm going to present the overview of the COMET program, as you see here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who will show some of our instructional design approaches, and then finally Bruce, who will go and present on some of the tools and techniques that we have developed in-house to handle what it amounts to being a large-scale multimedia production activity. Here's a photo from the famous landing in the Hudson River, and it's apropos for what we have been doing with the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service and the operational forecasters go from day to day doing somewhat fairly routine forecasts, but then what happens are events like we just saw this past week, where you have this horrific outbreak of tornadoes that swept through literally from the state of Texas all the way through North Carolina, that storm system. And when things like that happen, people have to be prepared, because the warning forecasts that go out are occurring very rapidly. They have to be updated very rapidly. And people the forecasters have to really understand what is happening in the atmosphere. What are the conditions? How are those conditions changing? They have a multitude of data that they have to look at, from satellite data to the radar data to numerical models. And you just don't have simply one numerical model. You have 3 primary numerical models. And so you have to digest all of that information along with reports that might be coming in from a spotter network in terms of where tornadoes are touching down and the direction they're moving in. So fundamentally, the bottom line is performance. And the COMET program was established in 1990 to support the modernization of the National Weather Service. And it was in the decade of the 90s that the Doppler radar system was put in place nationwide. And so the COMET program was established to basically provide science-based education and training to operational forecasters in preparation for them to take advantage of all the new technology that was coming into the modernized weather service. And that technology, of course, was new satellite data products, the Doppler radar system, and, of course, the further refinement of numerical models. Our program has been fairly stable and has been in the order of a staffing of 38 to 42 people. Currently, we are at 42, and our annual budget is $6.5 million. That does not all come from NOAA or the National Weather Service. We also have partners in the form of the Meteorological Service Canada. We work with the European Satellite Service called EUMETSAT. We work with the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. We have had long-term funding from the Navy Meteorological and Oceanography Command, the Air Force Weather Agency, and so forth. And we've worked with agencies such as the National Environmental Education Foundation in Washington, D.C. So collectively, all of these people are in a partnership because COMET is a cooperative program. And a cooperative program under government funding lies between a grant and a contract. And as its title implies, the government agency actively participates with us in carrying out the mission of the organization. As you can see, we have a large number of universities that have participated in COMET activities by either utilizing our materials or providing subject matter experts and faculty to participate in our residence courses as well as our virtual courses, which I'll talk about a little bit more, and of course in the development of our online materials. Currently, we have 600, actually over 600 hours of online distance learning that have been developed. Most of that online distance learning materials have been developed since the mid-90s on. As you'll see, in the early days of COMET, we used less accessible technology. Right now, actually, we have, currently, slightly over 190,000 registered MEdEd users. And to our own surprise, we continue to add about 5,000 registered users a month. You can see here that we still have 10 weeks of residence courses and what we call virtual courses. This has been a big change. When the COMET program started off in 1990, we predominantly were providing residence instruction, and the distance learning program was to provide supplemental material for science operation officers and the forecast offices to use to conduct office-level training. Well, that has completely turned around. Around the mid-90s, our residence program peaked at 32 weeks a year of residence offerings. And now we're down to about 10 weeks, but that also includes our virtual courses. And predominantly, we're doing online learning. And so that sort of also reflects what's happening at the world at large, especially in business and industry. As I mentioned, this shows our variety of sponsors who have worked with us over the years. This is a photo of members of our executive board that meet every year to overview our program. Our materials are made available free of charge, and I'll emphasize that. They are totally free for everyone to use for educational purposes. Here is the URL. This is our current website. But we also, over here, in a smaller size, we have our website totally in Spanish. So you can also access that, and we are continuing to increase the translation of our materials both into Spanish but also into some other languages, as we'll see in a moment. This is a screenshot of our revised meta that we're about to launch, and we expect that by June, certainly, that this would be up and running, probably sooner. We're right now in the process of testing everything out to make sure that there's no surprises. But this is a whole new look and feel, and Bruce will actually walk you through some of this a bit later. International users is quite large. I mentioned that we're over 190,000 total registrations, but we have quite a large international body of users that come from 200 countries. And I think in the CIA casebook, I think there's only 220 countries or something like that. So we pretty much have a broad coverage around the world of people using our materials. In terms of affiliation, you can see that education is our largest single group of users. As a cooperative program, the materials we develop are useful to our government sponsors and our other sponsors, but we, by law, do not do things solely for the benefit of the government. So through our MEdEd website and the design of our materials, we are providing this training and education literally to the world free of charge. You see this large segment called Other. Those are people who, when they register, don't affiliate them with these other categories that you have seen. And so we assume, and also from the feedback we get in surveys, that there is a considerable number of just private citizens who have an interest in the weather and in meteorology who are in this category. And in fact, one survey that came back was literally from a woman who was sailing around the world and was using our materials and accessing them through a satellite link. So that, a single story, but it probably is representative of a number of people who are in this other category. In terms of the education sector, we have considerable usage by college and university students and faculty. But one thing that interests us here, of course, is this large K through 12 educator category. And we assume that this is being used by a lot of science and physical science teachers who are just, basically maintaining their own skill levels. Through our registration system, we are able to gather a lot of information, and so you can see that in that large user base, pretty consistently here, we're finding that the average time in modules is almost an hour. We also make available print versions of all our modules so people can download those and use them in a printed form for study purposes if they so desire. And they can also, the print version is also a version that is nicely usable on devices like iPads. So that's another potential way that those materials are being used. We also allow our materials to be downloaded so people can install them locally on their hard drive. So teachers can do that, or faculty members can install our modules on a local network so they don't have to necessarily go over the internet. And we know for our international users, this is a big advantage for them because overseas in African countries and a number of South American countries, the bandwidth broadband is not available. Here's an example of the breadth of total modules we have by language. You can see that Spanish is our largest alternate language other than English, but working with Canada, we're translating more of our materials into French. And then these are done by people who have just simply volunteered to take some of our material and translate them into their native languages. In terms of our Spanish users, here's a breakout of the number of people. So for the 20 years that we've been operating, this slide here kind of summarizes why we think we've been successful by the fact that we have maintained the funding for these 20 years. And that is that we have a strong equal partnership between science and instruction. As Deputy Director, my doctorate is in the area of educational psychology. I'm old enough that my degrees preceded a lot of the formal programs in instructional technology and instructional design, even though I've been working with that now for well over 30 years. The director of the COMET program, Dr. Tim Spangler, is a meteorologist and atmospheric scientist. And so this partnership between education and science permeates the structure of our staffing. And so we have instructional designers working shoulder to shoulder with meteorologists to produce the materials that we create. The focus on quality is in balance with efficiency. We've gotten to a point now that we generate, for the last 3 years, we've been publishing between 50 and 60 hours of online materials. And many of these materials are fully mediated with audio, detailed animations, and detailed computer graphics, as you'll see here in a moment. We have to stay flexible, and I'll have a slide that shows you that over 20 years there have been a lot of changes in the base technology for delivering materials at a distance, and so we'll go through that. And then, of course, this is extremely important. We are constantly in partnership with the people who fund us and with the university community. And we have representation from the field level on an advisory panel that meets twice a year. And then we have an executive board that is members, senior members of these sponsoring agencies. Over the 20 years, we've managed to accumulate quite a number of awards, as you can see from this slide. This one right here is, I think, of particular note because we're the only organization other than the American Museum of Natural History in New York City that has gotten this award. This award has typically been given to individuals, and so we're the second organization that that has gotten that particular award. And then from the field, where the rubber meets the road, as the old cliche goes, here's the National Weather Association. These are the people who issue the forecasts, and this organization just here recently gave us this public education award that we're very proud of. So when I say that we had to be flexible, when we started our distance learning offerings, we were using Laserdisc modules. And here was the system. It had to be a specially equipped PC with a Laserdisc player, a special card in the PC to drive the Laserdisc. Some of our first modules, because it was very expensive to produce these Laserdiscs and then publish them in any quantity, some of our first quote-unquote modules were really courses that were like on the order of 15 hours in length. And we used some of the first applications of the cognitive apprenticeship approach in designing these materials. And you can see that they were boxed to be placed on a bookshelf. But it took us anywhere from a year to 2 years to produce some of these Laserdisc, based materials because of the complexity of the technology and taking full advantage of the cost of producing something using that medium. Then in the mid-90s, or around 1994 basically, we started to migrate to CD-ROM. And as a consequence, our material started to get on the order of 2-3 hours in length and were published on the CDs. And then, starting around 1996, we started exploring the feasibility of using the internet to publish web-based modules. And now that's all we do. Everything we do is web-based. And now we have a collection of different approaches that we do using the web. We have our interactive multimedia modules, such as this one. And this is a scenario-based one.
I'm a newbie at Spangdahlem Air Force Base here in Germany. I transferred in from Marone Air Force Base about 3 months ago and had recently been certified to work behind the counter. Today was my third shift working unsupervised, and I was hoping for an uneventful 8 hours. My name.
So that gives you an idea there. And then we have our webcasts, which allow us to go and when noted people come through our residence program, we're able to capture their presentations.
I'm Jim Muller from St. Louis University, where I've been a professor of meteorology for about 25 years. I've also co-led and taught numerous.
And then we collect our various modules into online courses, such as this one on fire weather, advanced fire weather course, and then included in that can be a virtual conference, as you see here. And when people complete this type of course, then of course they, in addition to certificates for each individual module, they get a course certificate. We conduct virtual courses. We use the Moodle course management system to organize these courses. And here you see the instructors in what was formerly our residence classroom. We are now talking out of a new facility, which is our virtual classroom facility, because we anticipate doing more of these. For us, a virtual course is a real-time synchronous course that people sign up for and attend at a distance in a concentrated fashion. Our typical course is 3 days in length, with morning sessions devoted to presentations and lectures, and afternoon sessions devoted to the people at a distance breaking up into work groups and doing various exercises. And then we also through our MEdEd website, we're able to take materials that are embedded in one of our modules, again like this one.
Another astronomical impact on tidal variability is caused by the shifting location of the moon relative to...
And what we do is make this available through a searchable database that Bruce will show you again too off of our MEdEd website. So anybody can download these animations and incorporate them free of charge into their own PowerPoint presentations. So we've had to keep up with the technology over the years, and now for the future we're confronted with a variety of mobile devices. We have a portion of our website that allows people to go out and download versions of our materials that will run on a smartphone or on their iPads. Of course, we have our own Facebook page that we stay connected with the community. And then, of course, we're also putting some of our materials, elements of our materials, publishing them on iTunes through the National Science Digital Library location in iTunes University. And we also have been exploring our own YouTube channel for also presenting some of our materials. So now I'm going to turn it over to Pat, and he's going to go through some of the things that show this combination of sound science with innovative instructional design, outstanding graphics, and an operational focus. Pat?
Okay, thanks, Joe. Obviously, I won't get time to show you the full range of things that we're up to here, but I'll give you a taste of a few things anyway. And as Joe said, you can come to this website and take anything you try out any of the materials you like free. You just have to register. It takes you a couple minutes. And so you can take a closer look and browse what we have. And if you'd like, maybe we can send Steve a list of modules that we think might be best for you to look at to look at the kind of range of instructional designs. But I'll show you just a couple things. This module here was one of the ones that Joe showed you on the awards page. This won a Brandon Hall Award, Gold Award, for design, custom design. And this demonstrates our use of case-based learning approaches. And in meteorology, because forecasters are processing amazing amounts of data, they're having to analyze that data, diagnose what's happening, and then they make decisions about how they're going to issue a forecast. It's really appropriate to use case-based learning techniques because it's really hard to just teach basic science and that kind of thing and expect people to go out and do the job. They need practice going through cases. So we developed, okay, well, am I getting the redirect? Okay, let me go back to MEdEd and see if I went away. Yeah, I went over. That would be the best place. You know what I'm worried about? If I was on MEdEd before, I might just come back in.
Might have to log out and log in.
Okay. Go to here. Sorry. Do you want to go first and let me go out and...
Not because you're logged in, you're using it to log out.
Yeah. Okay, I just did, right? I need to close the browser entirely. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I know you said go there, but... And we are back, and I just have to log in. So this way I can demonstrate to you our simple login process.
All by plan.
Exactly. Show you how fast it is. Okay. So what this module does is it takes you through.
Begins while starting a shift at 3 UTC on 1 December 2000 in the Arctic Forecasting Center.
It takes you through the process of issuing a forecast. It gives you the experience of actually being on shift doing a forecast. And this opening section kind of orients you to the situation. The location here in Ungava Bay, which not many of us down here in the lower below 40th parallel know about, but 45th parallel. But we talk about the situation because forecasters need to have the situational awareness. They need to know what's happened in the days leading up to the event. They need to know about the geography.
It is 3 UTC 1 December 2000. 0 UTC data are available, and the new prog set has started to arrive.
So they need to be aware of what kind of data is going to be available to them based on when it's issued, all that kinds of stuff. Once they get oriented here, these various pages.
500 HPA 0-hour prog shows a low over Fox Basin.
So we provide data products that provide these various overlays that they can play with. Forecasters have tons of visual data, and they have these really complicated ways that they can overlay various kinds of data. So what we're doing here is we're trying to recreate that operational environment in a very constrained web-based format. So we use lots of techniques, and Bruce was the primary designer on this module, so he deserves the bulk of the award that we got from Brandon Hall. I always make sure and plug, though, that I was one of the contributing designers on this. We kind of brainstormed this up together. That's the kinds of things that we're doing with the module here.
It is early December, and you know that there will still be open water in many parts of the north.
So you can see we're looking at the various elements that they need to consider. So here they're looking at which parts of the water are ice covered. And when you click on this map, it would expand. I won't do it right now, but you can see a large-scale version of this map to see the detail that's necessary. Once you get oriented, you move into the case challenge. And I'll go right to page 2 with the first question. The way the module is designed, it's a series of questions that you would ask yourself if you were a forecaster. You'd have to look at certain parts of the data and make decisions about what you're seeing. So in this case, you're asked to look at the numerical weather prediction, that's NWP guidance, and decide, what is it in the atmosphere that's happening? Is there a cold upper air trough? Is there a warm air advection going on over Hudson Bay? All these things. And the way you do that is you look at these various data products. So again, I talked about using the overlays. Well, you've got all these various toggles here. You can turn them all on and be absolutely confused, or as a good forecaster would do, you'd selectively overlay different kinds of data to see what the relationships are to one another. So you would look at the various data products, but you also have these supporting topics available. Now, this is where we're applying, like Roger Shank's approach, where you don't teach anybody something until they need to apply it. So what we've done here is we've compressed all of the kind of lecture material into supporting topics. And so if you're struggling here, you see you're not sure what you want to look for, you might click on these topics here to learn a little more.
The cold air mass moves over a water surface.
The important things that you need to apply.
From the water to the.
And so there's multiple pages here.
Potential temperature against height through the vent.
And I can also get at these topics down here. That one happens to be just the text.
Propose the idea of SIS.
Look at one more here so you can kind of see the range of things available.
Barotropic instability.
Sorry, not a good range.
Studies tracking the occurrences of polar lows across northern and eastern Canadian waters show a high concentration of events in the southern Davis Strait and
So you see it's both basic science, it's some climatology, it's some orientation to the geography, those kinds of things. These are all important pieces of information you need to know to proceed in the case. So I'll close this, make your decisions, and Then what happens is you get your correct item feedback, and you get an expert discussion. Now here's where we're applying, kind of a cognitive apprenticeship approach. As you work through the process, you're getting an expert that's providing you guidance about how you're performing to help you with the next step of the process. So again, just to save time, I'm not going to go through any more of the steps here, but the bulk of this module is presented in this format. Presented a question, you go off and explore information that will help you answer the question, and then you're provided feedback after you've done that. At the end, there's a case summary, which we kind of summarizes everything that's the entire case in the way that the expert probably wanted to present the information to begin with, in this very linear mode, but nicely summarized. I'm going to show one more quick example to show you the range of what we're doing. We use case approaches quite often. We use scenario-based approaches that are more storytelling, where you interview people, where they tell you about their decisions. Not quite as operational as that one, but that seems to be a very appropriate learning approach for much of what we do, because we're primarily addressing the operational audience, no matter what field we're teaching in. The one other example I want to give you, I guess, is a more recent module on tsunamis, so very timely here. We just had one of the largest tsunamis of the century occur. Now this is much more direct instruction.
In time, tsunamis wash up at nearly every shore.
I'm going to jump to a section called Initiation.
When a large volume of seawater is suddenly displaced, tsunamis result. Let's look at the mechanics. Thrust faults tend to make the largest earthquake-generated tsunamis. If the rupture happens quickly, typically within a few seconds to minutes, the water rides up with the seabed and then, propelled by gravity, slides off as expanding waves.
Okay, and I'll go to one more page.
The main mechanism of energy transfer from rock to water is the potential energy change that results from lifting up or dropping down water as the seabed deforms, pushing the sea surface out of equilibrium. Waves form as the displaced water regains equilibrium under gravity's influence.
So here we're taking a much more traditional tutorial approach. We're teaching you basic scientific concepts one at a time. We're using our strength, which I think is our multimedia, our ability to do really nice illustrations and animations, that sort of thing. But taking a much more direct instructional approach. We end each section with summary questions that just test your knowledge. How much did you learn from here? You can see basic multiple choice. Here, we use a lot of ingredients type questions. What are the factors or ingredients that are needed to here determine the strength of a tsunami? And then we also include summary interactions that are slightly more complex. In this case, you're asked a series of questions that ask you to evaluate which of the tsunamis do you think is more likely to be stronger. And eventually we lead to question 7, which asks them to evaluate this one. I'll choose earthquake A as the one that's stronger. It sure looks like it's going to be stronger because of the area. And we show them that what we've been talking about are 2 actual real earthquake events. One was the Indian Ocean tsunami that was the mega tsunami that we all know about from 2004, and then another tsunami that was almost equally strong, or excuse me, another earthquake that was equally strong, but didn't produce a tsunami for various reasons, and that was the point of the lesson. So anyway, I'll stop there and let Bruce take over, and maybe we'll get a chance for a few questions here towards the end.
Are there any questions out there at this moment in time?
We're getting some no's at this point, so if you want to continue, please do, and I'll be collecting any questions that people want to put in the chat window or anyone that wants to raise their hand to ask.
Okay. Well, Bruce is going to go through some of our tools that we use to produce things, and then afterwards we may have time to show some more materials.
All right. So I'm glad Pat showed some of our more modern stuff, because a lot of the presentation has kind of been focused on the past of COMET. But in the last few years, we've been really progressing in terms of following, moving our content into standards-compliant HTML format, moving a little bit away from proprietary technologies like Flash, trying to make things a little more universally accessible. But I'm the production manager here at COMET. I've been in this position for the last couple of years. We produce on the order of 50 to 60 contact hours of asynchronous material. And at any one time, we usually have somewhere around 15 projects that are actively being worked on by a staff of around 38. So a lot of project management goes on around here. A lot of media needs to be developed to support the material that's going to be put out on the web. So I was going to talk a little bit about how internally we handle pushing so much content out the door every year. I'll show you some of the things that we have on our intranet that supports our instructional designers and project leads and our METs as they start putting things together, as well as the development group, the folks that I oversee. This is a peek at our intranet site, our Inside COMET, where we have tons of resources available. I'm just going to take a look at one of them, which is our the main area that we work most of our project management through these days, which is our active projects list. And you can see currently we have 72 projects that are in some state of initiation or close to being published or have just recently been published. We opted here a few years ago, as we were starting to really ramp up our productivity, to not adopt something like Microsoft Project as our main tool for project management, because we felt like it was a lot of overhead to just maintain as a system, big learning curve for a lot of people to really learn how to take advantage of it. And so instead we've developed our own internal tools for that. And the active projects list is our primary tool in that. And as you can see on here, we have a bunch of metadata on each project that you can access. We make it available for everyone in the staff to see other projects. I'll log in real quick here. And so for every project, once we get it into our system, we put basic information in there, purpose, descriptions, comments that we share with each other, who's in charge of doing it, how we charge it on our paycheck, a project plan, and then a progress report where we, on a weekly basis, the project lead goes in and tracks completion of major milestones of the project. We all kind of fall back on the ADDIE approach towards managing projects. If you guys are familiar with that, I would imagine you've heard it at some point as instructional design students and professionals. They're nodding, okay. And so the ADDIE process is kind of how that's kind of what we built this around. On a weekly basis, folks then have a form that they fill out that gets sent out to our project management team, and we get somewhere around 30 to 45 of those every week. And our cluster managers, who are the ultimate project managers, and myself get together on a weekly basis, review those, look for any red flags, issues that are going on, coordinate resources, take care of fires, and try to keep things running smoothly for our leads. See, there's other stuff in here I can just point to real quick. You know, we give access to the site that's under development, make it easy for folks to go see where things are at as it's being developed. That's the active projects list. Part of that is also a database where we track the specifying and the production and finalizing of all of the media that we produce here. Currently, this database holds somewhere around 14,500 records, and those are all the images and animations that we've produced since around 2007 2002, I believe. I think it goes back to 2002. So when a project lead is putting together their storyboard, as they start specifying the imagery and media that they need to support it, they enter it into a database tool where they specify the type of file they need, they give it a name, all sorts of information, the alt tag, the description of the object, instructions for the graphic artist or the animator that's going to put this together. And we use this tool then to submit this into our production system for the folks producing it, to hand it back to the project lead to let them know they can review it. You can see their statuses up here. And so it's a part of our production process. And then the cool thing about it is that we leverage that database to provide access. I'm going to log in here to our site real quick. I don't get a redirect. In our search field, where you can get access to our modules through a search field, you can also get access to images and media. And so searching for ICE, there's 442 records in there where there's a description, somewhere in the description there's a reference to ICE. And if you do a blank search on our site, you can access all 14,640 media objects, and then we make them downloadable for folks to grab and reuse in their own presentations. What else was I going to show here? So part of the development process, and an important one, and I'm assuming with you guys being instructional design students and all, see that we follow a fairly rigorous process-driven schema here to get things done. We have a fairly detailed web module development process, starting from the very beginning. Again, this is following the ADDIE pretty much, that we let our project leads work through. And we also provide them with various storyboards, templates for storyboarding their material that makes it easy to hand off for developers to put together.
Bruce, Kelly's asking if you have special tools for creating storyboards or whether you use something like Word or PowerPoint.
Well, what I have up on the screen right now is just a Word doc. This is one format that we use for storyboards, but I was also going to show, we don't really constrain our writers to using any one type of storyboard. There's been times when we've been more constrained about how we want to see storyboards written, but we've kind of opened that up and let people do what they want to do as long as they give us clear instructions on the development end. But this is an example of one storyboard where we provide an outline of the table of contents, section numbering and such, an area to maintain status of the draft status of this storyboard. For each page, in this particular case, it's going to be the contents going into a flash file, so it's narrated. In the left-hand column, the narration that's going to be recorded is here. And then the visuals that go along it are here, and then any kind of instructions for the developer go in the right-hand column. This is kind of our stock storyboard. It's probably used the most for most of our projects that are narrated flash presentations. And Word is probably the most used tool for us here. Sometimes people will prototype things in PowerPoint to get a feel of how things are going to flow. And these days, we set ourselves up with a Google Apps account about a year and a half ago. And a lot of our material folks are developing collaboratively using Google Docs because it's such a nice tool working with external subject matter experts where folks can get in there and collectively work on a document. We have all sorts of stuff that's getting done collaboratively with external folks these days. And another tool that we use
a little less so these days, but also one that might be of interest for you guys to check out, is Zoho, Zoho.com, and they have, for a nominal fee, you can get a fairly nice project management suite that's also cloud-based. It gives you good access for sharing and collaborating on document creation and document libraries, forums for discussions, a wiki, all sorts of things. So we provide our project leads with various tools that they can work with to get their content written and get it to the final stages for development. I think that's about all. It's kind of a quick look at some of the things that we're using. Joe, want to add anything?
We have a couple of questions. Is this a good time to hit them, or?
Yes.
Yep, go for it.
Kelly also wanted to know whether or not your design efforts first start with have corresponding design documents.
That kind of depends on whether it's a new design. If we're attempting something that's rather different, we'll pull together a team of people, including people like Bruce and then his developers that work for him, and perhaps even some other additional instructional designers besides the ones on the team, and some managers to discuss the new design and review a design document. For some of our more standard designs that we're just repeating a design, we'll just kind of refer to a past project that it's being modeled on and pretty much proceed. I think that's pretty straightforward.
We do start off most projects with a project plan. So we have some standard attributes of the project that we try to nail down early on, and then, as Pat was saying, depending on the complexity and differences that are going to go into any one project, the design component of that project plan will be very elaborate, and in some cases, because we've been doing this for so long, we have so many kind of standard approaches that we take to our modules. There's not all that much that we put into the design area.
Do you want to mention how we moved to using the print version and then generate the online version from that?
Can do that. Are there any more questions on project document kind of things?
We've got one other question. Linda's saying, you've been moving from proprietary structures to standards compliant HTML to be more universally acceptable. She's wondering first if you if your instructional designers needed to relearn in terms of developing their content, in terms not coding but instructional techniques that needed to be adjusted, and also if the printable versions you have are used for screen readers.
Yeah, well, let me talk about the structure of any one of our average modules. I'll do a really short one. This is one of our more recent publications. It's very short because it's just an introductory piece to a 4-part series. And this is an HTML-based module, so there's very little narration in this one. And I'll just give you an overview of how we structure these nowadays. The foundation of our modules is a print page, essentially. It's one long HTML page. And we essentially look at this as the warehouse for the content in the module. And instead of us this is another one of those things where we've decided to keep things simple. We could build a database and database all our content and have a content management system and feed all of our material out through a database-driven system. But that adds a lot of overhead, and it tends to kind of constrain you to the system's templates and the system's kind of box that you have to work in. So we've kind of decided not to do that and to keep our overhead a little bit lower. So every module has a print page, which is essentially the database. It's an XHTML-based structure. Every page has some scripting behind it that makes it unique as an element. And then over in the module view, which is the view that the majority of people go to right away, we parse that content out from that one long document into a page-by-page presentation. In this particular case, it's all HTML-based. There's no narration. In a Flash-based version, on this view, on this page, because it's a PHP page, so we have server-side tools that we can use on this, we swap out the content here with the Flash narrated file. And I think I can show you something if I can remember the URL to go to.
Just to chime in while he's doing that, you asked about compromises. We haven't really had to compromise too much because, one, our developers are looking for HTML equivalents for all the kinds of interactivity that we used to do in Flash.
Welcome to the Go's channel selection.
And two, we can embed Flash within these structures.
Yeah, we can. So this is a great example because we're tweaking our template a little bit based on some requests that we've received. So this is the one that's going to publish in another couple weeks here. It's a very long, like 2 hours of content on satellite tools, satellite instruments, and how to make good use of those. So again here, all of our content's housed in this one long page. So if somebody wants to print this content and take it away with them, they can go to this and print it, and they'll have a ream of paper, but they can go sit on a bus without a connection and go through it.
And this is also screen readable.
Yep. Very accessible. This whole thing can be read. And it's also accessible on an iPad because on the print version, we strip out any kind of Flash animations and provide a still image as a substitute. Now over in the module view for this one, since we have a narrated version,
Welcome to the Go's channel selection learning module.
We're swapping out the Flash, and we've just added this ability to switch between the narration or the text-based content from that page. So as we start thinking more about the iPad universe getting bigger and bigger, and the inability of or the unwillingness of Apple to adopt Flash, this will provide access to our material in almost an equivalent form for that, and also for low bandwidth devices, for people that don't have high bandwidth. So you can switch between narration or text.
The infrared water vapor channel on board GOES 8.
Any questions related?
No, a comment. Linda's saying that's a great solution to be able to swap the narration and the text.
Okay, good.
We've looked at tools like, and I'm sure you guys, as part of your schooling, you kind of look at all the tools that are out there, and I'm sure you guys have come across Articulate as a tool where you use PowerPoint as your basis. Basically, PowerPoint is the equivalent of our print version there, that print page. And you do all your work in PowerPoint, and then you allow Articulate to crunch it out as a Flash presentation. And that, too, can have the text equivalent made available. And we've looked at that. We used Articulate for a while. We still use it a little bit, but it's very constrained for us, it feels like. We can't do everything that we want in that kind of a tool, so we've kind of developed our own platform.
Any other questions?
Other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to find out, it seems like there is a lot of coordination with experts in different fields. Can you explain a little bit on how you work together to put the geographic content with meteorological content, with everything? How do you make it all happen? Can you elaborate?
Lots of different ways. It depends on the experts, but obviously we love to be able to get together face-to-face and spend days chatting with them and asking questions and doing detailed discussions of the content and trying to piece it together that way. We do, sometimes we have them lecture to us virtually or have virtual meetings where we discuss the content. Sometimes we have people draft raw content for us, rough scripts that then we adapt into multimedia approaches. Graphics, sometimes we'll ask them to sketch things for us. We'll sketch things, feed them to them, and then they'll provide us modified versions back. We do a lot of iteration. We have them review at various parts of the process. It's always hard to get people to review thoroughly, so it's a constant battle where you get them to review something and they say, yeah, everything looks good. Then you produce the multimedia version, then they say, wait a minute, it's not what we need. And it's because it is hard to envision multimedia until it is multimedia. But we do the best we can to try to do an iterative process so that we get their input all along the way. Bruce, any more about working with SMEs?
No, it's just that it's always hard, and it always takes twice as much time as you think.
Bruce mentioned Articulate Presenter. That was a tool that is used quite a bit internally by people in the National Weather Service. And it's often the case that people will look at a tool like that as the solution, but as we constantly tell our sponsors, the production portion of the process, much of which you just saw Bruce going through in terms of the tools, it's actually just the tip of the iceberg. The proverbial part of the iceberg that is under the surface is this process of working with the subject matter experts. I mean, we'll run into a situation where we're working with people in the European satellite service, and we'll have a great period of interaction, and then suddenly the person we're working with is sent off for a month to go to some country in Africa and work with local forecasters down there. So that's where these tools for monitoring the active projects, looking across our projects, become very important, because on a weekly basis, Monday afternoon, the cluster managers, we have a management structure in which we have senior project managers like Pat who have a cluster of projects and correspondingly staff that they're responsible for. And then there's Bruce, who heads up our production group, and we get together on a weekly basis on Monday afternoon, and we go through the weekly reports that the project leads have provided. And we use that meeting to juggle resources. We'll look and say, okay, this one project has moved into a roadblock. The SME is suddenly unavailable for a month. So we then juggle schedules around to move something up and advance something, or to put a person onto another activity. And so it's a very fluid, type of activity that goes literally from week to week in terms of how we allocate resources and how we, look at our schedules.
One other really quick thing to say is we do have some internal expertise as well. I mean, COMET has about 12 scientists on staff, primarily meteorologists, and so we can just develop content internally depending on the subject matter.
Yeah, I was going to point out this one project I worked on recently, this one that's up right now. The subject matter expert for this one is down in Australia, in Melbourne, so we have to deal with time differences as well. So whenever we wanted to have a call with these guys down there, it was like 9 in the morning their time and like 5 in the evening our time, and so it was really hard to do that. But he was collaborating, his co-author was actually in Oklahoma up here. So he was working with somebody there, and we then had somebody on site as a scientist working with them. And so it's just this constant, as a project lead, you're constantly facilitating this connection between the people and trying to give them good structured tools to work with to make it easier for them. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of coddling to get it done.
Coddling is a great verb.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Joe, I don't, what? We don't have any other questions, so at this point I'd like to thank you and Pat and Bruce very much so for being so gracious with your time and expertise.
Okay, well, we really enjoyed the chance to present what we're doing to everybody. Gee, I thought I was going to, where's my...
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, and contact us if anybody has questions or wants to see anything.
Oh, good. I'll do that. And also, so I could, whose email should I use to funnel students' questions?
You can send it to mine, Steve, and I'll forward it to Bruce or Pat.
Okay, that would be great. And in addition, you mentioned somebody providing us with a list of several modules that you think might be representative that people might want to spend more time on?
Yeah, I can't do that immediately because I'm just about to travel, but I can try to get something to you sometime soon, just a list of a few modules. Or maybe we can pull some of the staff to suggest a few of their favorite modules.
I'll do that tomorrow. I have a brown bag lunch with project leads tomorrow, so I'll ask them to give a list of their favorite instructional approaches represented in modules.
There you go. We'll get everybody involved.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
All right.
Take care.
Sounds good, and I'll be seeing all y'all in June.
Okay.
Looking forward to it. Everybody have a good evening.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Good night.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.